And here in Australia, we have a few things in the ocean that can produce a bit of fear. Some big sharks and jellyfish and all this kind of crocodiles.
As I said, 3 meters, 4 meters, you feel already pressure. What about 10 meters? Is it like, escalate?
But we're still rocking like a Nokia 3510 brain. Do you remember the old Nokia bricks?
Yeah.
You have the ability to watch that thought and just go, that's okay. Don't chastise yourself for it and let it go and reconnect to breath.
Pleasure to see you, Adam.
Thanks, Gennady. Pleasure.
Yeah, so it's midday in Australia. It's very early at my end, and we will start our interview. And thank you for your time. I know that every minute you spend out of the water, you count as like boring.
Oh, look, the thing is in water, no one can get to me. They can't call me. No emails. That's the best thing about the water. No one can get at me. So
it's true.
I have to work on land.
Actually, when Samsung advertised their phone that it can work in water, I thought, what a crazy idea.
Yeah, I know. And look, there are some things like watches and things that are starting to work in water. And I'm just like, what's the point? Water's the escape. Leave everything else on land.
No, smartwatches is probably okay when you see, I'm using it in the swimming, so it's good. It shows usually before I add up laps, like I've done more than I really did. Look at the watch, you cannot follow it.
The problem is sometimes you're in the pool, and I used to use one. Sometimes you're in your pool, and like with freediving, it's all about like getting really nice and relaxed. And then next minute, a phone call comes on your watch, like ding 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 ding.
No, I never experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can answer under the water like.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, look, tell us about your first of all a little bit about yourself. I know that you are incredible in terms of achievements in the water. I mean, you are the deepest diver, or among the most kind of deepest free divers in the world, right?
Yeah, so I was always living in Australia. You always kind of gravitate towards the water in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just simply swimming or surfing or at the beach. But the road to freediving was a little bit different for me. And here in Australia, we have a few things in the ocean that can produce a bit of fear. Some big sharks and jellyfish and all this kind of crocodiles. And so, we not like most people don't go out deep. They kind of stay close to the shore. But
when you say deep, how deep it is? How deep, let's say, starts deep? 3 meters. For me, 3 meters is deep enough,
Yeah, and look, 4 meters is deep enough to where you've got to equalize your ears. And if you don't equalize your ears, you'll be in a lot of pain. So, I mean, everyone's idea of deep is different. And for me in the beginning, I remember diving to roughly about 10 meters and looking up and just going, that's a long way up. Do I have enough to get back up there? And that's, so I suppose for me, the journey with freediving came at a very good time for me because like a lot of people, I found myself in a bit of a mental struggle with some mental illness. And I found this sport / recreation at about that time that was very much making you or forcing you to deal with your emotional state and deal with some, self-defeating thoughts. So it came at a really good time for me. And that's, I found freediving through spearfishing. So a lot of people spearfish here, which is just freediving with a gun.
What exactly it is, spearfishing?
So spearfishing, you have a gun and you freedive down and you look for fish. So it's very popular here in Australia. But that's how I found myself getting into freediving. Now, spear fishermen or people don't really have to go too deep. In fact, probably the deepest they will go is 15, 20 meters to hunt fish. But what it was for me, it wasn't necessarily the chasing the fish around and trying to get some great fish to eat.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was what it did to my mind that really captured my imagination. And then I started to go, I don't really care too much about shooting fish in the face.
Yeah.
It's more how I felt and how I was able to leave all the stresses and pressures and things of my everyday life, how I was able to leave that alone, and how any body of water, and you would have felt this yourself, Gennady, when you come up to a body of water, whether it's a pool or a river or a stream or the ocean, it just has that way of bringing you to the present moment, because you think like, I wonder what the temperature is. I wonder whether there's any fish in there. You know, again, how deep is it? Is it flowing really quickly? Am I going to be able to swim against it? So it's something that I think for all humans, coming to a body of water brings us to that present moment more so than quite often in a land environment, because we own land, we're safe on land, we know what to expect, whereas water is a little different in that respect. We don't always necessarily know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. And when you said about mental illnesses and some mental problems, because a lot of people feel that in Australia, you cannot have it because there's beaches, there are bikinis, there's the sun, and you feel that that's great. But that shows that really we are what we are, and changing the location very often doesn't bring us expected desirable effect. So we have to deal with our own thoughts and mind first. And then any environment, whether you're in Australia or Papua New Guinea or somewhere deep in Russia somewhere, can get you the same state of happiness or unhappiness.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, you know, the human brain is just an absolutely wonderful thing, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual, you know? If you get a computer and you don't quite know what's going on, you can get the owner's manual, or you can type it into Google and you can go, hey, what's going on here? And we'll fix it. The human brain doesn't come with an owner's manual. And so, you know, not even your scientists or psychologists at the top level really fully understand the human brain. And all of our brains kind of operate differently. So, you know, in Australia, yeah, we have the beautiful beaches and things that you see on the surface. But for some people, it's just like the pressure of not feeling like they're achieving enough.
Right.
You know, Australia has a model, is very much capitalism, all the rest of it, where it's kind of constantly work. You've got to achieve a certain, you know, status, right. Like a lot of Western countries do. And so people that, you know, don't quite live up to their parents' expectations or whatever, you know, sometimes they get thrown into mental illness from that point of view of just their own, it's their own pressure, but they still feel it. And that's kind of some of where the Pressure Project was born. And for me, what it was I started to look at what pressure was. And, you know, when you're in the ocean, that's real pressure. You know, like when you're dropping down really deep into the ocean, you are actually being crushed.
I can imagine. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it's like, as I said, 3 meters, 4 meters, you feel already pressure. What about 10 meters? Is it like, you know, escalate?
Well, to be honest, the first 10 meters is the worst, because the pressure from the surface to 10 doubles, but from 10 to 20, it doesn't double. Yeah, so the first 10, it doubles, then it just another atmosphere for each one. But on the surface, we're affected by 1 atmosphere of pressure, and at 10, it becomes 2. So it doubles instantly, but it doesn't double as you go along. But yeah, it's one of those things that I was like, that stuff in the ocean that's actually compressing me, that's real. What about all of that stuff that I worry about on land? Is it real, or is it only real if I accept it as being real and put that kind of tag on it of stress and then let it affect me? And that's the real kind of, that's when I started to go, there's something in this. There's something in this. And, you know, in terms of human hierarchy of needs, we can go a long time without food. You know, we can go a decent amount of time without water, all these things. But you take oxygen away from someone and instantly you see how they deal with stress and anxiety and all these things, because oxygen is number one to us. You know, you take someone's breath away and sometimes that brain just starts going haywire. And
Right.
if you don't have the ability to control your emotional state, you know, if I go out for a competition dive and I'm going to try and do an 80-meter dive,
80,
and
sorry, how deep?
80 meters,
80 meters.
yeah.
80
So
meters.
that's kind of where I'm pushing to now. I've been to 74. The next competition will be 80 and beyond. But if I rock up to that competition day and I can't control my emotional state, I let the thoughts get the better of me, and I enter a state of stress, I may as well pack up all my gear and go home.
You control your
And
fear, basically. It's a fear, which is
basically,
major sort of.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. So if I can't control that, I mean, a lot of other sports are a little bit more forgiving, right? You can kind of have that odd thought and you can be a little bit stressed or a little bit hyper. And in some cases, it actually works for you. But if I'm about to dive that deep into the ocean, there's just no room for stress. And so this is kind of some of the message, is that why not have that same thought process in our everyday life?
Mm-hmm.
Why not kind of go into a work meeting with your boss or whatever it might be, and just say, do you know what? There's no room for stress. No matter what happens in this board meeting, I'm going to survive. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is our brains. They're, you know, I kind of liken humans in this day and age, like we're like bright, shiny iPhone 11s, right? We're bigger, we're stronger, we know more about health and fitness, and we have all these supplements, and doctors can keep us alive for longer. But we're still rocking like a Nokia 3510 brain. Do you remember the old Nokia bricks?
Yeah.
Really old phones. Simple devices, right? You can just make phone calls, text, and play snakes. So we're demanding more from our brains than ever before. But when we get stressed out about things, now our brains were only ever kind of designed to find food, which is now attached to our jobs and financial. We wanted to find a mate. We wanted to find love. That's why love hurts so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wanted to stay alive from those saber-toothed tigers that were running around. But our brains are still set up like this. That's still what they want to do. So when you stress about money, for example, or whether you'll find the right person, or, oh God, can I, you know, my boss is really riding me, will I still keep my job? Our brain still picks that up as a threat to our life. And when it's the difference with, like, if I see a shark, for example, we've got that evolutionary response that says, oh no, shark. And it'll flood our body with blood so we can swim away or run from a tiger. But our bodies and our brain were always built, and we're adaptive to that. On the other hand, that constant worry, that constant stress, our brain still picks that up as threat to our life. But it's so consistent that we produce those stress hormones so often that it breaks us down. And then things like mental illness or just normal illness come into play. And that's I suppose, that's what I feel like is really hampering and, you know, keeping us from achieving our goals and things, because it really kind of keeps us in that stress state, which is really bad for our health.
So this type of pressure, really, which is, like, as you said, consistent, and we worry, even if we're kind of normally, we worry that we are afraid to lose it if we don't, if you have it, and if we don't have it, we worry, you know, what's next, etc., etc. So that's true, and a lot of people on my channel, they're talking about how to deal with that through meditation, through all sort of things. But what you're suggesting, you can deal with that through deep diving. So you can do that with the help of the water, right?
Yeah, I mean, freediving in itself and being in the ocean have a lot of health benefits in themselves. But, you know, freediving is basically movement meditation as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does is, when you, like I was saying before, when you go on one breath, which is the definition of freediving, is you're diving deep into the ocean on one breath without a breathing apparatus. So that's what separates scuba diving from freediving. When you go onto one breath, and when you get really good at eliminating stress from your dives, not having those stressful thoughts, it brings you to the present moment. You know, when you're on one breath and you're diving deep into the ocean, you're not going, oh, did I send that email? Like, there's just none of that going on. And so the more you practice that,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you do it, you know, things that your brain gets better on land. So now things that used to stress me out, I just see it the same way as almost like a deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you might be halfway down, you're not feeling amazing. And instead of having that thought like, oh my God, Adam, are we going to make it back to the surface? You just go, it's okay. We've got this. We've been here before. Let go of the shoulders, let go of your body, and just let yourself sink into the dive and be able to control that emotional state. And that's, I suppose, what most of us, or not most of us, but a lot of people don't have the ability to do, is they get these patterns of stress, these patterns of anger, these patterns that, you know, they are so used to, and there's a term called amygdala hijacking. And the amygdala is tied in with your fight and flight response. But it also, the amygdala holds memory. So it stores memory of all sorts of emotions. So it also good emotions. So when you hear a song that reminds you of school, you can get that really nice feeling. But like if you're in the traffic and you've got the memory of when someone cuts you off, that you get really angry, that's a memory and that's a pattern. And then all of a sudden, when someone cuts you off, you become a raving lunatic, right? And you get really angry. And it's like, that person didn't necessarily mean to do it. You know, they might have some stuff going on in their life, and it might hold you up 5 seconds in your day. But some people get so angry that they're on the horn, they're following people, they're getting really aggressive, and it affects their own internal environment. Now, the amygdala hijacking is, the amygdala hijacks the front part of the brain, which is your prefrontal cortex. Mm-hmm. And that removes conscious thought or problem solving. And which is also where we have some effect with things like PTSD. So, you know, returning servicemen and women from the army, they've trained their amygdala, and all of their memory is look for threats and react. Yeah, don't respond to things. So there's a big difference between react and respond.
Right.
And so you can see stimulus come in and you can respond in a calm way, which keeps your internal environment positive. Or you can go back to that pattern of reacting. So what they found in, you know, returning army men and women was that their amygdalas were actually kind of bigger in size and more reactive. And so, you know, they're at the beach and a helicopter goes overhead. Just, you know, in Australia, we have helicopters that, you know, sometimes look for sharks and things. But, you know, for them, their memory is helicopter overhead could mean danger. Right. So they jump in the bushes. So it hijacks their problem-solving conscious thought. But this happens in everyday life with everything, whether it's road rage, you know, whether it's someone giving us constructive criticism, but our pattern is to get really defensive and angry about it. And so, you know, you spoke about meditation. That's one of the ways in which you can, sitting still, being calm, connecting with your breath, a thought comes in that may not be a good one. Now, I do a lot of meditation. Sometimes they're really crappy thoughts, but you have the ability to, you have the ability to watch that thought and just go, that's okay. Don't chastise yourself for it, and let it go and reconnect to breath, or, you know, do a body scan or listen for sounds and all these things that we freedivers use in our arsenal to be able to get to the point where we know we're about to dive stupid deep into the ocean. We know we're about to be crushed. We know we're going to go on one breath for a few minutes, but yet we have the ability to control those thoughts. And if we have that ability in our everyday life, then you can eliminate stress, which stress is the biggest killer of humans. Absolutely. It suppresses our immune system, which at the moment, as you know, Gennady, our immune system's pretty important right now.
Well, I think the most important probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, and, you know, you've only got to look at, in terms of with the immune system, when a surgeon wants to transplant an organ into someone, what they do is they inject the person with stress hormones, cortisol, which suppresses the immune system so it doesn't attack the new organ.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about if you live a stressful life constantly, and you think about even like the fact that we produce cancer cells every single day, and it's only our immune system's ability to find those cancer cells and attack them. But we live a stress filled life, which suppresses our immune system. You know, all sorts of illnesses and you know, the fight against cancer is made a lot tougher. So big implications.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I think you mentioned, and I thought I misunderstood you, how much time you can spend under the water on one breath?
When you're diving, you know, generally an average dive is probably about between 2 and 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. But myself personally, when in a swimming pool, mm-hmm. laying face down in the water, playing dead, not moving, I've done 6 minutes before.
6 minutes. And yeah. It's not going to do some brain damage to you, this lack of oxygen?
No. Although some people have called me brain dead before.
That's for another reason.
Yeah. So what actually happens, and the interesting, and a lot of people ask this, and I actually had a doctor say to me once, "Oh, that's not possible. After 5 minutes, your brain dies." But what in fact happens is you can what's called blackout. So it's a defense mechanism of the brain. So when your oxygen levels in your blood drop to, they think about 50%, right? So a normal functioning healthy human being operates somewhere in the high 90s, somewhere between 98% and 100% oxygen saturation. They think in a breath hold, when you get to about 50%, mm-hmm. Is generally where they say your brain as a defense mechanism blacks you out. So what that means is your subconscious registers that the oxygen levels are really low and it switches off your conscious mind. So you just, what? And you black out. You don't take in water. So it closes off the larynx. And what it's doing as a defense mechanism is saying, all right, we're switching everything else off, mm-hmm. and all the oxygen we have left, we're going to redirect to the brain. Because in order for us to stay alive, the brain needs to be alive. Mm. So quite often what happens, Gennady, is, you know, a freediver might have pushed their limits and they do black out. Let's say on the way up at about 10 meters, they black out. The larynx spasms, so no water goes in. You have to get the diver to the surface, and then it's simply about signaling to that subconscious that's still going that you're now out of the water and it's safe to breathe.
Do you have to smash him?
Yeah. Well, in some ways, yeah. So I've blacked out a couple of times. And what you do is you take their mask off and you blow air in their face. So you tap lightly and you talk. So it's Adam, breathe. Adam, breathe. The subconscious says, okay, well, if we can feel air on our face and we can feel touch and we can hear someone talking, then we're obviously not underwater anymore. And then 9 times out of 10, it's just the lights come back on. And you don't know what's going on. Because I've blacked out a couple of times, only in the pool, swimming too far. But I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, I come up and I'm like, oh, I'm okay. Sweet. And the judges are like, no, you're not okay. You just blacked out. And I'm like, oh, bugger. Oh, okay. All right. So the human body is such an incredible tool. But until I found freediving, I don't think I ever truly tapped into how powerful we are.
It's near-death experience. Look, it's near-death experience, really. So you're almost crossing the line, right?
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of, yeah, I suppose in a way it is. You are pushing the boundaries. And even though freediving is a super safe sport, if no one is around, and the number one rule of freediving is you never freedive alone, especially when you get to the point where you start to be able to push your limits. Because if you do black out underwater alone, that's it. If no one's there to get you out of the water and signal to your subconscious that you're out of the water, then yeah, that's the end. And we do unfortunately have that. People do freedive alone or spearfish alone. They push their limits a little bit too far, they black out, and unfortunately the worst does happen.
It's interesting that I'm going to talk to a friend of mine, the lady, first Ukrainian who climbed to Everest, female.
Yeah, wow.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I'll send you the link. And she was saying that people are losing their limbs high in the mountain, not because they don't have warm shoes or gloves, but because brain understand that there is a little bit of warmth left, so and oxygen, and it put everything to the brain. So exactly the same mechanism. And no matter how warm you are, you have electric socks or all these fancy things, you can freeze your lungs out. So, and it's interesting. So it's a similar mechanism, which is incredible.
And the funny thing is there's a lot of parallels between climbing high and diving deep. Firstly, the lack of oxygen. So a lot of people say in Australia where we don't have a lot of altitude, a lot of people that may want to say climb Kilimanjaro or climb Everest here in Australia will do breath holding exercises and freediving because it makes the body better at using oxygen and dealing with lower levels of oxygen. But what you'll find with people who climb high mountains, they do a lot of breath work as well, because you can actually create heat by changing your breath. And this is one of the most powerful things, Gennady, about the breath is that it's the only thing in the human body that will happen unconsciously without us, right? So when we go to sleep or a security guard chokes you out or for some reason you do become unconscious, for whatever reason, your brain, even without you consciously being awake, you will breathe, right? It will happen. But it's the only thing in the human body that on a dime or instantly we can also change, right? So if I'm in a heightened state of arousal or I'm stressed out and I'm in my stress zone and I'm breathing with my chest like this going, and I'm angry or I'm about to get into a fight or something's going on, the great thing about breath is that I can change that instantly and I can have an effect on my nervous system through breath. So if I'm going like this and I consciously am aware of it, I'm like, oh, I'm too up. I need to change this. I can stop. I can sit down somewhere. I can close my eyes down. I can start to breathe through the nose, which is the most effective way. And I can breathe with my belly. And I can affect it instantly, which affects the rest of my body and also my nervous system. So for a long time, doctors and science thought that, look, the nervous system's automatic. It's called the autonomic nervous system. And because it's that, you know, whether you're in your sympathetic, which is your stress system, or your parasympathetic, which is your rest, digest, and regenerate system, where we want to be, you know, we didn't have any control over that. But what freedivers have known for a very long time is we have control over this nervous system. And it's something that should be taught in schools. It's something that, you know, everybody should be taught because you can control your own nervous system. And all it takes to get from, you know, people that have anxiety attacks and things like that, or suffer from anxiety full stop. What we now know is that about 3 to 5 minutes of closing down the eyes, which is significant because it tells the brain that where we are right now. So if I close my eyes now, it tells my brain right now that this environment, there's no threats because this guy's closing his eyes. So he's not worried about anything. So it's significant. Then obviously relaxing your body, but breathing through the nose. So you get better quality air when you breathe through the nose. It's our filtration system. It also dehumidifies the air. So you get better quality air into the lungs. And diaphragmatically breathing. So those things in conjunction with each other stimulate what's called the vagus nerve. Now, we're only just tapping into the power of this vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in the human body, but it's responsible for putting us in our parasympathetic nervous system, which is, like I said before, your rest, digest, regenerate system, which is for freediving, we have to start our dive in that system. Mm-hmm. If we're not there, go home. That dive is dangerous. So, but if you think about the implications or the application for our fast-paced 21st century world, if we're not able to kind of control that nervous system, or at least add in little breaks like this, like I see so many people here in Australia, and it's probably no different where you are, Gennady, but they just run so hot for so long. And then they kind of go like, oh, I need a holiday. And they go and they set a holiday, and then day one of the holiday, they're sick as a dog because their body has finally gone, all right, now that you've stopped, we've got you.
Right.
You know? And we just don't have any tools and tips. And this is one of the lessons that I got from the deep, was that, you know, I never feel as good as when I'm about to do a really deep dive. That 5 minutes where I'm laying on the ocean, about to dive down, because my body and brain, that connection between the two, it knows it so well now because I do it so much. And not just in a freediving sense. You know, I do my daily meditation at the park or in my house or wherever it may be. And so you build a body-brain connection that's so strong that when you get into that zone, they talk to each other and they go, oh, this, yep, we know this. This is our relaxation zone.
Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the biggest problems is that we've become so disconnected from our body more so. We live in our head. Yeah, like we're just so in our head. We're worried about our status. We're worried about, oh, you know, look at all these people on my social media. They're all doing amazing things and I'm not. Or, you know, my partner, are we going to stay together? We're so in our head about so many things. Mm-hmm. And we're very rarely conscious of what's going on in our body. So, you know, when I run a freediving course, for example, like one of the very first things I get people to do is have a little go at a breath hold. And the first thing they say to me once they're finished, they're like, oh, my heart was beating really fast. And I say, no, in fact, it wasn't. It's just the first time in a very long time that you've become conscious of what it's doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in fact, we have this thing in our body called the mammalian dive reflex, which we share with whales, dolphins, seals, orcas. And so humans are physically built for diving. We have the same thing going on in here as a dolphin. But what we don't have is that mental capacity. And so what actually happens when we start to hold our breath is our heart rate actually starts to slow down. But people, because they've tapped into their heartbeat for the first time in maybe 5 years, they all of a sudden are like, oh, my heart's beating out of my chest. But in fact, it's lowering. So that's what I love so much about putting people through freediving courses, is that you're able to shine a mirror up to them that they've probably not had in a long time, where you go, this is how you deal with stress and anxiety and pressure. And I got you to that point within 30 seconds. Now let's work on how you can work through that. And we're going to do that in the ocean, which is not uniquely your environment. And so it's why I love it so much, because I had to walk that path, and then I can help people walk that very same path. And then they, in their everyday life, can go, I just dove to 20 meters on one breath. I can tackle this and I can deal with stress because, you know, I know the real stuff's out there in the ocean.
It's amazing. So many positive implications of that, really understanding your body, really listening to your body, because there are a lot of studies now that our body is our brain. So a lot of our body thinks, and there is sometimes reaction from the body to the brain, not vice versa. And of course, dealing with the stress and what life usually brings us, very often negative stuff. It's amazing. It's the same as I was doing martial art, and when you feel
Yes.
some problems or heart pain, you feel, but then you go to the tatami, and you do kumite, and then somebody hits you hard somewhere you don't want. You forget about all the other worries, because that is immediate kind of pain and
Yeah.
an immediate threat, and then you have to deal with it now. So power of focus, and you forget about all these trivial things.
Well, it's really relevant that you mention martial arts, because a lot of the martial arts, like you say, they work on breath as well. They work on that connection.
Of
And
course, yeah.
what I quite often say to my students that are really trying to dive deep is I tell them, I say, it's a two-way feedback loop. It's not enough to just feel relaxed in the mind. You have also, there's a lot of wisdom in your body, and they talk to each other. So what happens is sometimes, something as simple as taking a breath in and then letting go of your shoulders while you're laying on the surface of the water and letting go of your body. The body sends a signal to the brain that, hey, we're relaxed down here. This is all fine. And then vice versa. A relaxed, calm, clear mind sends a message to the body that we're all good up here, so you can relax. So it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I suppose, the biggest hurdle that I find, or the biggest challenge that I find is, with my students, is all the thoughts that are going on in their head quite often send a message down to the body, and they're really tense.
Mm-hmm.
And then quite often I see it. I see the tension, and I say, hey, Jane, let go of your shoulders, let go of your hips, let go of your legs, let go of your entire body. Just take some more time. And then you see them go, and then you see their head and neck even let go, and they start just connecting to their breath. And then they'll do a really good dive, and they'll say to me, oh, can you talk me through that again? And I say, no, you can talk yourself through that very same thing. And that's what, the guided meditation apps and things are good for a start. But I think so many people get a little bit too reliant on apps to talk them through, like, oh, close down your eyes, shut down your mind, relax your jaw, do this, that, the other. And so they're reliant on listening to someone else tell them to relax instead of their own brain telling them.
That's
and so, yeah.
There are a
And
lot
so
of guided meditations as a good thing. But you're right. You have to be self-contained. You have to have something within, really. Not just to rely on outside again, outside for happiness, outside for meditation, outside for something. And you are basically kind of under control all the time. So you are not controlling.
Yeah. Well, with my retreats, I run retreats, and they're a bit longer. So I call them freediving and meditation retreats. And a part of that is we teach people how to do self-reliant meditation, because that's real world, Gennady. Like, if you're in a stressful situation, you can't just always go, all right, somebody talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody talk me through a meditation. I'm not feeling good. But you can, once you get to that self-reliant meditation, you can kind of walk over to a park bench, sit down, put your sunnies on if you're worried about people looking at you, but just close down your eyes and get back to your practice. So that's real world kind of thing. Whereas, some people I find go, yeah, I do meditation, but they're so reliant on the guided stuff, which, like I said in the beginning, guided is fine. It sets the platform for you, but you want to eventually get to the point where you don't need the guided stuff. And that's, I suppose, where freediving kind of fast tracks that, because you don't have someone in the ocean going, oh, Adam, everything's going to be okay. Relax your shoulders. Like, it's just you. And especially when you get under the water, you lose sound. You can't hear anything. So, you've got to be able to self-regulate, remove that stress. If you do get a bad thought, be able to deal with it in a calm manner and then keep moving on. So it's the great thing about being on one breath and all the rest of it, that, you know, it forces you to take bigger leaps, if you like.
Interesting, fascinating. Now, let me ask you some kind of practical questions. For example, can people do that? I mean, I understand that breathing technique can be done not necessarily in the water, right? So you can do a lot. You can prepare yourself maybe for the water. You can prepare yourself holding breath, maybe even, no, in
Yep.
out of the water.
Yeah. So around the world at the moment, a lot of freedivers are doing what they just call dry training.
Right.
And so, for example, there's things that are called dry statics. So what I explained to you before, where I was in a pool face down for 6 minutes like this, you can do the same thing laying down on your floor. And so, you know, if you wanted to do the exercise, and I always suggest to people that they do a freediving course before they do breathwork stuff, but you can look online and there's things called carbon dioxide tables, where you do intermittent breath holds, not really big ones, but ones that help you deal with CO2 buildup, so carbon dioxide buildup. Which is fantastic for any type of training. It's also a mindfulness meditation exercise. And then you've got another one called oxygen tables, which are longer breath holds, but with longer rest.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of freedivers around the world are doing these type of things.
Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I run, you know, a training group here, which I'm going to run tonight. We do it in the pool. So if you have access to a pool, that's a fantastic place, but you never do it alone. You never, ever do it alone in water. You can, on dry land, you can do it alone. So another little thing, a good place to start as well is something called apnea walks. So apnea just means basically holding your breath. So apnea walks, where instead of just going for a normal walk and breathing the whole time, you might start off where you do 20 steps on a breath hold. And let me tell you, it starts to burn fairly quickly. And you know just how important oxygen is to you when you walk without breathing. So the first thing that happens is your CO2 builds because you're not letting it out. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and the great thing about breath hold exercises, if you are an athlete or you just want to increase your health and vitality, is it actually makes your body use the oxygen that it has in a more effective way, also deal with carbon dioxide, but it is a form of altitude training. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of sporting teams, a lot of people will kind of go to altitude to get this competitive advantage. They don't necessarily need to do that. They just have to do some exercise on breath hold. And you feel amazing for it. As you can imagine, I mean, oxygen is absolutely everything to humans, right? When you go to the hospital and something's wrong, the first thing they look at is your oxygen saturation. Heart rate will tell them nothing. If you are breathing normally and your oxygen saturation is lower than it should be, nurses and doctors and things will go, there's something seriously wrong with this human. Their oxygen saturations are too low. It breaks down the food we eat. You know, oxygen in the human body or human existence is absolutely everything to us. But yet we don't spend any time on working on our breath. And so it's a real shame because, you know, people are, you know, there's people that climb Everest in board shorts by regulating their breath, you know. You know,
this lady of mine, this friend of mine, Irina Galai, she goes without oxygen. So she just using, you know, she's not using the equipment, which is amazing. There are not many people.
Well, she trains her body for that. Mm-hmm. And it's very similar to a freediver. The training would almost be mirror image. She would be doing, I mean, she quite possibly lives at altitude. So she's, in a way, she's kind of depriving her body of as much oxygen as we can access, because she lives at altitude. But I could almost guarantee she'd do a lot of kind of breath hold training, because what that does, our spleen, for example, is a blood bank, and it holds reserve blood, which is red blood cells, which has oxygen attached to it. Now, free divers, and also probably people who train to walk up Everest, for example, their body gets better at contracting the spleen on demand, and all of a sudden you get this fresh hit of red blood cells, which carries with it fresh oxygen. So I know myself, I can almost feel the moment this happens when I'm diving.
Like rush into your body, sort of.
Yeah. You go from like not feeling great, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there we go. That's the mammalian dive reflex, right? So all of a sudden you get this fresh hit of blood, which brings with it fresh hit of oxygen.
Is it some people call it second breath, runners, or it's slightly different? Because there is a saying in my culture that second breath is like, you out of it, and then all of a sudden you start.
Yeah, it's like a second wind. Yeah, second wind.
Second wind, I think it's called.
Second wind. It's a little bit different because this comes on really quickly in a breath hold situation. Whereas that second wind can be like, it could be halfway through a marathon.
Okay.
It's a little bit different, but I suppose in some ways, I think that is your body changing systems, like with that aerobic, anaerobic type of thing, with that type of exercise. But this is an evolutionary thing that we have in our body, that which is just incredible, because we share it with like whales that dive in the ocean. This happens in their body. And so, people come to freediving courses all around the world, and they have so much anxiety about what they're about to do. And sometimes all you have to do with a human, and this goes into so many different aspects of life, is all we do quite often is just instill a little bit of belief. So they come along to the course and they're all worried because, at some point I'm going to have to hold my breath. And then you say, hey, we have this mammalian dive reflex that does A, B, and C, just like a dolphin. And sometimes in these courses, Gennady, like someone might start with a minute breath hold at the start of the day. And then when you teach them a few breath techniques, and then you instill some belief into them that they're built for diving, some people get 3 or 4 minutes by the end of the day. So the gains in the early days of freediving are all psychological. They're all mental. And look, us freedivers, we are mental. But a lot of the gains are simply mental. Physically, this human body is ready for it. Psychologically, not. So a lot of the stuff we're working on, like some people go, oh, should I train before I come? And I say, no, you don't need to. And they go, are you sure? And I'm like, no, trust me, it's fine. And the great thing about most sports, and you've done sports before, Gennady, it's like 80% of it is trying to get to that fitness level that allows you to keep up with everyone.
Exactly.
And then that extra 20% is like that mental game that's like, all right, I'm now starting to hurt and I'm going to beat that person because I'm a bit mentally tougher. Freediving's the reverse. It's like 80% of it is mental. And 20% is, okay, I should do some training. So it's quite a unique sport in that respect. Probably something close to your friend who climbs Everest. That there's a big mental part of that. Physically, yes, they've got to get in physical shape, but then, when there's a blizzard or, that's a mental battle there.
Incredible. It's fascinating. And of course, I would feel like, oh gosh, I would like to try that. And so, but is there any chance, you said that it's possible, breathing, I understand, but is it possible to have guided course, even not being, in Australia with you? Is it, or it's like not really feasible?
Yeah, it's possible. So, I mean,
because my daughters, for example, going to the swimming pool, Right? And
Yeah.
is it possible
Yep.
to arrange
So,
something, a group of people, to who would do that under your guidance?
yeah. So look, COVID-19 made me have to drastically change my business. So in fact, my website right now has a free 2-hour course on it. So people can log on and get a free course in
People will
freediving.
be delighted. My viewers will be delighted.
Yeah, yeah. So they can go to my website, which I'm sure you could put out for them.
Right.
Yeah, and they can do that for free. I did quite a few Zoom courses where we did a full day course, which gave them all the safety tips as well, so that they could go to the pool, for example. And I know freedivers all over the world, so there's every chance we could link up with a freediver in your country and get something going as well for them, because it's something that for me, freediving wasn't very big in Australia, and still isn't as big as most sports here in Australia. So there wasn't really a big community. So I basically set up my own community. And now we have a really big community here where everyone comes to training and they do their courses, and we do retreats in different locations. So, but you can do it dry. You could do it in the pool. If you can get to ocean, definitely link up with some freedivers and go what they call down the line. So you don't just go plop yourself in the ocean and just start diving around. You can have a line which you get connected to. So it's super safe.
You use that line in order to go deeper, right? Otherwise you won't be able to go deep probably enough, right?
Yeah. And, for some people, you need that reference point as well. Some people really need a reference point because the ocean's so big, and sometimes it's foam.
You can lose orientation.
Yeah. Yeah, like for me now, when it's super blue and clear and deep, I love it, But I've seen some people, even when it's super clear, and for me, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is the best day for you to come out. Let's go. They get out and they dive down, and it's disorientating, but it's a little bit kind of like humbling because they feel so small all of a sudden. On land, they're kind of walking around like, whatever.
I have our money jeans, yeah.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden, they're kind of like, wow, this is so expansive. I can't see anything for, miles that way and that way and that. And I know sharks live here, and, it can be really daunting for
I'm
people.
already scared just listening to you. Look.
But you know what? The thing I like about people that come to the courses or come to freediving full stop, and I was in the same boat, everyone comes with a healthy level of anxiety about it, but they still come. And that's what I think, that I tell people all the time, a stronger person resides on the other side of fear. What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. If you constantly stay comfortable in your life, you will never evolve. You will never grow. You'll only ever be where you are now.
Very wise, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's in the courses and things, it's great because they are challenged. There's no two ways about it. But also, it's in a really safe environment. It's we don't go, hey, we're now out in the middle of the ocean. Just try 20 meters. It's like, hey, all the tips and techniques we used yesterday and we learnt, let's try it out to 4 meters and see how you feel. And if they feel amazing, hey, let's drop that line to 6. See how 6 feels. And if they go like, oh, Adam, 6 is way too easy. I love it. Okay, well, let's drop it to 10. See how 10 feels. And so it's slow progression. And each time they go a little bit deeper, the brain goes, tick, that's safe.
Okay.
Right? Until a certain point where they might feel a little bit, oh, that doesn't feel so great. And then we stop it there. We go, okay, 14 meters was a little bit challenging. Let's try it again. Let's do a much bigger breather. Let's spend a little bit more time on the surface connecting with breath, and then try it again. And then sometimes the next dive feels amazing. And they go, oh, that So, the most important thing about the actual dive is not the dive itself. Like from my point of view, my body has the wisdom, it knows how to do it. My brain has the wisdom, it knows how to do it. We've done it before. But the most important part of that dive, especially if I talk about competition, is the 5 minutes before, the hour before, the day before, the week before. A lot of people kind of live stressed, and a lot of freedivers, they live stressful lives. And then they rock up to the line and they expect that in that final 5 minutes that they'll just be fine. Well, it's like, no, you kind of need to live that life to have a really stress-free dive. And that's what I say to people, like freediving is not just about that event on that day. It's about living a life. So it's more, like I say to people, it's a way of life. It's a way of living. And that transfers over to really successful diving.
It's like in life, when you have critical situation, and if you are not prepared, you fail. But if you have your life built up, then you can face a lot of tough things, which comes, and then, so it's really, it's like who you are, not in that particular second, but how you build up yourself
that's
those stress.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And it's funny you say that because, most sports, the elite competitors are generally very young, right? In freediving, it's not the case. In fact, the younger people that come to freediving, and I don't know exactly why, my gut feeling is that it's because they haven't gone through enough. You know what I mean? And so when it gets really tough, they quite often tap out. Whereas, a lot of the older competitors are the ones that are at the top of the game. Because like I said, it's not so much a physical game, it's that psychological game. And so when you've experienced a lot of life and you've experienced a lot of tough times and all the rest of it, I think, like you were saying, your brain just gets used to, okay, well, this is tough, but we've got through tough stuff before. And so, some of the younger, people in their high teens or early 20s, they don't necessarily do all that great.
This resilience, they don't have this sort of, yes, you're right.
Yeah, so one of the great things about freediving is you can do it for a very long time. One of my dear friends, he's like 60, he was 66 at the time when he said this, but he said, Adam, I just want to do a meter for each year of my life. And so at the time he was about to turn 66 and he did a 66 meter dive. At age 66, he's diving a 66 meters into the ocean and coming back up. So it's quite a remarkable sport where, it's people come for all different reasons, but it's the sensations and the feelings they get and the ability to completely switch off. Because when you're going down, after about 25 meters, you just sink. You don't have to kick. The ocean above you starts to just push you down and you just free fall. And it's quite an amazing feeling. It's like flying, but you're just going the other way.
It's something what we saw in the movies, in the horror movies, people.
Yeah, for some people, yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. A really wonderful thing. Can you give us just one more advice, maybe, to people who watch this? I mean, how for the summer is coming, so people will be going out. Is it possible to do something like, you have to be trained, right? You cannot do it just by, going to 3 meters out of the blue. So you have to have some guidance and preparation and breathing.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like, it's one of those things that it's like anything, Gennady, like, you couldn't just rock up to an A-grade tennis club and you've never played tennis before and you just grab a racket and you go, hey, let's have a hit. You just need a little bit of guidance. Like, oh, okay, watch the ball, backswing, follow through. You know, it can be something as simple as that. In freediving, a lot of it is like the breath side, but you know, what I'd be happy to do for your people as well. I mean, the free course is there on my website, but we could always do a little, coming into summer, a little Zoom breath workshop, which could help them. Because I mean, like, just for example, like if I told you to take a big breath, this is what I'd see you do.
Mm-hmm.
It'd all be chest, and you just go,
mm-hmm.
and you'd hold your breath, right? A full breath, I don't know whether you'll be able to see this, but we'll try. A full breath starts from the stomach,
mm-hmm.
up into the intercostal region,
mm-hmm.
and then up into the chest. So if I kind of turn side on here, you might be able to see it better.
I think if you could take your shirt off, but
then no way. All right, but I'll show you. Ready? So you'll see my belly rise first. Then like a wave, it'll flow up, and see how long it takes. So I'm about to start.
Wow.
It's 3 o'clock.
So that's how long it takes me to get rid of the air. So we very rarely tap into the potential of our lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So our lungs, and quite often that's through that technique, being able to fill right up and access more area or more volume in our lungs. So something as simple as that. I mean, I can take in 2/3 more air by doing that. And when I first started, I did the same thing, just
mm-hmm.
and away I'd go. Whereas just before, filling right up, and then you saw how long it took me to let it all out.
Mm.
So we just don't tap into the potential of this human body and brain. And I suppose that's one of the key takeaways. But also, so there's two parts to it. There's the stress relief, the ability to control your nervous system, you know, through things like meditation, mindfulness, all the rest of it. And then there's the performance side. So
yeah, and health benefits. But looking at you, how old are you? May I ask you?
68. I look all right, hey? No, I'm 35. 35.
Right. But I saw you, I mean, to be honest, I was expecting you to be wearing, you know, nothing apart from swimming trunks, but because you have such a fantastic physique, and I saw you in action.
That's the X-rated version.
Yes, I put some links, you know, some video coverage of you swimming, which is amazing, which is like really like a dolphin yourself.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah. It's very sexy at the moment, freediving. It's getting a lot of girls coming along, and I get this feeling like a lot of it, they're just wanting the photos that I take. But look, it is very sexy at the moment. People are getting dressed up and doing all sorts of things underwater and dancing, and you know, they're getting in wedding dresses and doing photos and things. So it's very sexy, but it is also, you know, you've got the recreational side and the sporting side. So, you know, there's a lot of, and there's some people that just come because of the movement meditation side as well, and how it makes them feel. So,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries.
I mean, it's more than I hoped for, because I was like fascinated by, I knew that you're great, but all these things really are new to me as well. So thank you so much, and talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Gennady.
And you'll see us and me on your course for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Gennady.
Okay. Yeah. Have a lovely day, and bye-bye.
You too. See ya.